Welcome back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sana, as always, here, and I am bringing a conversation today for every one of you, which may feel uncomfortable for some, grounding for others, and deeply familiar for those who feel like something in modern world just isn't sitting right in their body or their mind. We hear phrases like pure mind, pure blood, and we immediately raise questions. What does purity even mean anymore? Is it physical? Is it emotional, spiritual? Or is it something else? Maybe it's a story we tell ourselves when we are overwhelmed and we are looking for control. My guest today did not arrive at this work through theory or trend. His journey began with loss, grief, and a moment of defiance. After losing two parents to cancer and being told there was nothing that could be done when their son was diagnosed with autism, something shifted. Instead of accepting limits, he began observing, studying the body at a microscopic level, tracking patterns across blood, environment, stress, and lived experience. And over time, those observations led him to profound changes, not only in their son, but in thousands of people around the world. He's the founder of quantum research, working at the intersection of biology, environment, ancient practices, and modern technology. His work attracts people who feel depleted, confused, or failed by systems meant to protect them. And today, we are not here, listeners, to sell certainty. We are here to explore, to question, and to listen. So, this is a conversation about clarity, responsibility, and what it might mean to return to ourselves in a noisy, chaotic world. So, let's begin. And, listeners, let's welcome my incredible guest, Stan Kurtz. Stan, welcome to the Mindful Living. As always, it's an honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a beautiful introduction. The word defiance really resonated with me as well. And I think we're missing that type of power when we're taking a look at our health and what's happening in the world. And defiance was something that had to happen. And for me, what I would relate to, and when you're talking to people about how it might be uncomfortable, this would have been uncomfortable for me to hear something like this. And I wasn't looking for it either. It was my child, my mom died and that was difficult. And then my child was diagnosed with a condition that I was told was incurable. And he had seizures and, lack of eye contact, no speech. He had muscle tone issues. He had, coordination issues, sensory issues. So sound and things and touch were not registerable in a normal way. And uh, I found out, sort of quote unquote, accidentally at a conference when a scientist put on a screen, these kids have high copper levels. And I was like, what does that have to do with something that's permanent or sort of incurable? And when I saw that, there was something inside me that was logical and said, are these kids sick? Like, are these kids sick and because they don't speak that we don't do anything about it? Is that what's up? And I went up to the scientist after the talk and he said, I was like, are you saying these kids have high copper levels and you just add some zinc and it goes down and that I'm like, how many studies are there like this? And he's like, there's a lot. And I was really shocked because I believed what I was told, and it was very painful to be in that space of that realization, that I had nothing that I can do. And I think most of us kind of feel that way because we haven't been guided to what we don't even know. We don't even have a dashboard in our cars, of a body that say, your oil needs to be changed or, there's a problem. And when I realized that there was something wrong and that there's actually a lot of data, a lot of science, a lot of truth that supported that, I was very defiant against the system that
Mm.
was going to tell me that my child couldn't recover. And that's when I was like, wow, I have to dig in there because I can't trust anyone else besides myself. And and I asked him, how do I find these studies? And I ended up spending 15 months of my life reading studies and memorizing the data and learning the language that's inside studies. So, it's like they make it like Latin and things that are in there. Allele lymphoid nodular hypoplasia is one that I use a lot. And I'm like, that's a very simple thing actually, but it's complex words that I believe are designed to keep us from seeing that anyone could figure out that, allele is part of your intestinal tract. Nodular is a shape. um, the lymph system is what, helps to take on toxins, and hyperplasia is inflammation. And so it's a very specific thing, and if you can work on a car, if you can create art, if you can, put together something from IKEA, you can figure this stuff out. Um, but it just requires this this shock and this
Mm.
passion, or this love, or this just maybe it starts off, it feels a little arrogant in a way to say, oh well, I'm the one that can do something, meaning any person. But those things are kind of required to break through the asleepness of just giving it away to, well, there are specialists for this, so I should just trust them. And there was a researcher that I came across named Elaine Gottschall, and what she said, she was, I don't know how old she was at the time, but she was in the last year of her life when I met her, and she said, doctors are there to, that establishment is there to save a life, in case of emergency, but they're not trained on health, and you can't expect them to know about health. And she said, they're very good at what they do, but we can't, we have to do this ourselves. And, and that's just the truth. And the truth today, unfortunately, is that health, meaning your best self or your pure blood, is not in the cards for the businesses. They actually are more motivated they're, if somebody isn't well, and if they can give something to make it a little better. Another doctor from Yale said one time in a conference, like, this is how my mind works. I pick data out of, like, you know, out of soil, and it just becomes easy for me to see. But there was a doctor from Yale that said at a conference one time is that the way we're trained in medical school is we name things, then we blame the thing, and then we try to tame the thing. That's it. And it's not about what's the thing and how do we take it out? How do we get rid of it? And my feeling is, in seeing time and again what's happening, is that they actually, the medical system today, and there should be a different name for it, but the medical system today worships the things that are actually the cause, and they go after the things that are the body's response to it to calm it down because it gets very uncomfortable inside a body. If you have inflammation, which is probably the number one thing that people are complaining about in one form or another, it's because the body's trying to do something and struggling. And inflammation is actually a response that's very protective and often healing. But chronically, if it doesn't do the job, and that's the tool the body has, and it uses more and more of it, and it becomes uncomfortable. If the job of the medicine is to tame the response so that you can continue on with your life, because it's very important for you to go to work and live your life, and have a manageable life, then that's what can do it, but it doesn't take care of the root cause, and it's not supposed to, in my view. That's in my view. Many things are my view. Everything I say is in my view, and I let people have discernment to make decisions on their own, which I think is very important. Is for us to learn how to think and how to identify fact or evidence. So just know, I'm not sitting here saying I know everything, because I don't. We all only know a very small piece of reality. But in that humble place, I'll say that what I see is evidence across the board that there isn't, curative or restorative or, an effort. There's no win if they take something out of somebody. There's no win for somebody not getting sick. There's only win, i.e., money, if you continue to be sick. And people say, well, that's cynical. And I'm like, well, no, actually it's not. It's just fact. Like if you were in school and you got grades based on how often you made jokes, the whole room would be making jokes. So if in their world, their school is, if you do well, then you advance revenue, you shareholders applaud, and the board of directors is happy. And in our world, that's considered success. But if you look at the human being, the sovereign human being with compassion and love and care, that's not best for the human. It's best for an organism, an organization, uh, or organism, you could say. It's best for the survival of the organization and not best survival for the individual. And so that's what I reflect on in your introduction, by the way. I'm happy to talk about whatever you want next, but that one really resonated with me because I never really, defiance has definitely been part of my life, because I feel like in the early stages of my life, even fitting into traditional schooling, I defied that. And the problem I had, and I didn't realize it at the time, I just thought there was something wrong with me and I couldn't fit in. But I had too many questions about the assumptions that a teacher would make, or that or that were in history, or the way they forced you to memorize so many things without thinking. None of that was interesting to me. So I didn't fit in that system. I don't know where it happened, but I've always been a troubleshooter. I've always been interested in looking for patterns and looking at ways to learn that were different than someone telling me to believe and then memorize. And that was something I didn't realize was setting me up to find the answers for my son. Because when I did consume those studies, and learn, not only consume the studies, but choose the studies to consume, which is, I only wanted an outcome of my child to be 100% well. And so I was looking at studies that were looking at the biological issues that were holding him back, and children with the same condition back. Not necessarily him. I just knew that that pattern was in many people. And I wanted to see if that same pattern was in him. And then if it was, how to work on it. And what happened, this was all very organic, that as I'm going through the studies and I'm looking at the authors of the studies, you can click on the author and see what else they published. That tells you their motives, because you
Mhm.
can see that if it's all, let's say, funded for, use of steroids, for example, well, that's just about, blunting the immune system. That's not what I'm interested in doing. I'm interested in getting my son to the best possible health he could be based on wherever he was at. And so I started looking at that and said, okay, well, any researcher that's, just chasing after stuff that's not in the philosophy of healing, real healing, I'm not interested in it. But tell me something that might be wrong in the condition, which I didn't think there was anything. It turned out there were 750 studies. And if you think about how long it takes to make a study and then write it out and then publish it and get it published in a peer-reviewed journal, this is a lot of work. And there were 750 22 years ago. And that was shocking to me. And it took me 15 months to read it, learn the vernacular. First off, even download it, find it, get university access, sometimes pay for it. But, and I was in a position where I could do that. Not everybody is.
Yeah.
And so and that's amazing to me, and I'm grateful. But once I had it and I started reading, my mind likes to keep things really simple. So I like to go complex, go deep, look at all the data, and how do I simplify what I see? And what I started doing is at some point, it was overwhelming. The whole office is filled with paper printed studies. And I started seeing patterns in it. In my mind, I'm like, well, you can get to this condition because of pesticides. The closer you live to the farms that use organophosphate or chlorine pesticides, you will have neurological problems. That's interesting to me. So one person might look at the research and go, I understand what the cause is. It's pesticides, don't live near farms and eat organic. But then there were another set of studies that said the closer you live to mercury release in industry,
Mm-hmm.
mercury is a terrible toxin, that you're going to have more neurological conditions there. And I was like, oh, well, somebody might have read those and say, oh, well, mercury is the cause, and mercury in the industry is bad. There's some mercury in vaccines. So we really understand this. And then the other people were getting to it through infections, fungal infections, what was deemed to be viral infections. And just that was an issue. And there were even some recoveries where teenagers it would get a type of herpes infection and suddenly have major neurological disorders that mimic my child's symptoms. And then when they treated just that, they recovered. And I was like, oh, we found some recoveries and it has to do with infections. That's interesting. And somebody could look at that research and go, oh, it's infections. But, I had it to me, I wasn't really quick to make decisions. I just kept funneling data, and that's step 1 is to get all data possible and discern the data down to, did someone find something that could be helpful, or did someone find something that would reverse the condition? That's all I cared about. So when I piled them up, it was basically toxins, infections, which are interfering with the body, right? So you have the interference with the body's pure self. Then you had what was missing. So there were nutritional deficiencies in the body that were missing, and you can figure that out through urine and blood. And then there were basically things missing and things that there were too much of. So that's basically the whole story. Some stuff missing, some more things that you need, and toxins and infections. I could break it down to 4 piles. At the time, it was about 4 piles. If you look at some of the downstream things like inflammation, from the response to the immune system going after an infection, or the response to the body going after toxins, there are some downstream things. So there's really like 7 major things. And that works today is that there are 7 major things inside the blood. And we look at things from a molecular level in the blood. There's only 7 major things that I see that are the cause, because just the jump really far forward. But there's only 7 major things that were going on with my son. And what I find today is that holds true with all the 1,000 conditions that you know a name from: asthma, eczema, chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, bipolar, depression, even Alzheimer's, dementia. There's only 7 things. And there's stories like you can't imagine behind the name and the blame, like plaque. And plaque creates Alzheimer's and dementia. The evidence doesn't actually support that in science. The evidence says that people die with plaque in their brains that don't have either condition. So it's not direct. So what I see is in the blood 7 things, and the same things that can cause inflammation in the cells in the joints and can create Alzheimer's, or excuse me, can create eczema or asthma, are the same things that I see in Alzheimer's. And I'm not saying that's the case. I'm just saying the evidence points in that direction. And when we work on those 7 things that I worked on with my son, on somebody with 8 years of dementia in one case, or a newly onset Alzheimer's, we've seen this thing disappear in days, and sometimes hours. Like I've got one person was diagnosed with Alzheimer's. I didn't diagnose them. We don't diagnose and we don't treat conditions. I just care about getting blood pure in the context of what we're talking about today. So when we work on those things, I have the woman with Alzheimer's who was a shut-in and didn't want to go outside, and had was feeling like, oh my God, I'm going to die just like my mom, because her mother died of Alzheimer's and she was in a lot of trauma. The reality was, in 4 hours, we took care of the issue to the best of my knowledge, meaning that I can never know if there was other issues, but this issue that we took care of recovered her, meaning that what's my definition of recovery? That she said that she didn't have those symptoms anymore. And it's been 2 years, and she's still out there traveling and living a perfect, life. She's 78 now, and she's like a child, meaning that she's playful, she's in joy, she's doing her art. I had an an 80-year-old man with 8 years of dementia diagnosed, according to him, and he said, "I actually was hiding it for 2 years." Once he popped out of it, he explained a lot to me, which was an incredible privilege to see somebody reset their brain and like, review his life and then become conscious. That's kind of how it was. He repeated for 2.5 hours all the major things that happened in his life, and then when he was complete, he basically stood up, went to the bathroom, and he started sweeping and going back to his life, because he liked to keep things clean. So he's literally like sweeping my place and doing dishes. And meanwhile, everybody's either crying or they have their mouth open. So how did that happen? 8 years of this condition that quote unquote is plaque, which is the story behind the blame of the name of the condition. But ultimately in his blood, he had this infection, it looks like, and density of cells that was affecting his brain in a way where it couldn't function normally. And he was in fight or flight in the blood, and his brain was suffering. And that went on for 10 years. And in basically 2 hours, 2.5 hours, we'll call it 3 hours, he turned it completely around. It took 5 days to get his blood to the level of like a 20-year-old and really clean and dependable. But just taking 20% out of what we saw in the first day reset his brain. And so the summary I would say to all this is, and then I'll pass to you for questions, is there's really only 7 things when we look at all the 1,000 conditions, and we haven't looked at all of them, but we see a lot of things. There's 7 things that are going on underneath, and it has to do with, is something a toxin? Is something an infection that hasn't gone away? Is there a deficiency, or is there too much of something? And that is pretty much it. And we do that every day. And people that come, that enter into, our research studies, you'd say, they don't even tell me why they're coming. I'm not interested in the name. I'm not interested in the what they went through. I am to the degree of my compassion, but I don't let that interfere with my core beliefs of, well, that's fine. That's just an outcome. Really, we're going to look at the 6 or 7 things that we find traditionally, and we go after them with tools like you mentioned earlier, whether it's ancient tools, whether it's, 1800s tools or 1900s tools, or something we developed on our own that was born yesterday. And I look in all places that I can, all worlds, meaning all different parts of the world, all let's say indigenous communities and Asian cultures and the Amish, and I look over and over again to find solutions to these 7 basic things, and how we apply it, the order we apply it, how we use our intuition, how we use our past evidence, how we measure moment by moment to see if we're making progress, because it's super important to have a dashboard to say what you're trying is working or not. I didn't have a dashboard when my son was recovering. I just had to look at him in great detail, and I could see nuances of improvements and nuances of new negative things at the same time, and I use that as a basis to move. But today we can look at the blood under a microscope. We can see the improvements. We can hear the improvements from the person. We can watch the improvements. And that's not the only way, but we've got other tools to be able to do that. And ultimately, a conscious mind that is defiant against living in the way they are today. In other words, if your spirit tells you there's more, in my experience, there is, and it's always that way. Like, I get people that come in, and I say always, that's in quotes, because, I don't know, maybe something happened one time when somebody came in really pure. I have one example I can think of where she was pretty close. But I get Olympic athletes that come in and immediately improve their times. I had the bass player from AC/DC who's really in a good shape, and he loves his breath work. He extended his breath work on day 3. And I've got videos of all this. So if anyone says, "Oh, how do I believe this?" You could just go to my channel and watch all these people talk about what happened to them, and you can see the proof. You can see the proof there. But the bass player for AC/DC on the 3rd day said, "I just extended my breath hold and my breath work by 1 minute." That's amazing. That's like a 30 some odd percent increase in his cardiovascular. So healthy people that live healthy lifestyles, that have unlimited resources, they still come and get breakthroughs. And the whole concept is, we aren't who we think we are. We aren't to our best selves. And this research stands for how to get people to their best selves. And pure blood is an interesting concept because I feel like pure blood would be if we were pure from the beginning. Well, we're not. It's like, from day one, there are things that happen in the traditional hospital that puts things in us that limits our abilities, in my experience. And we're backtracking our bodies to try to get as much out as possible so it has the best chance to support itself. I believe in the human body. I believe it's absolutely the most amazing thing that I've seen. And I believe it makes all sorts of great decisions, and I want to remove things that are getting in the way. It's almost like if you have a friend and you see them getting beating up in the schoolyard and they're on the ground getting punched, I want to walk over and remove the punching. There's going to be some recovery time. There's going to be some possible damage forever. We won't know. But I'm not going to let somebody sit there and get punched. So we're just wanting to remove the bully inside the bodies. We want to give water. I'm just thinking about the guy and the kid in the schoolyard. Give him some water. Tell him he's okay. Rub his back. Like that's the type of thing we're doing from a conceptual standpoint. And what we see is magnificent. I mean, there was a guy yesterday who just did a testimonial, very smart man, and his daughter had a skin condition that covered her entire body, and she's had it since almost since birth. So 14 years. She's 14 years old. Yesterday was the first day she said, I think I'm at the point. This is only after 3 days. She goes, I could go to school without makeup now. My skin looks so good. She goes, this is the first day I feel feminine. And I just saw Dad's look on his face. She's like, "Yeah, I feel feminine. I don't feel afraid. I don't feel like I need to hide." Like, that's what's happening to society in one way or another. We all have a layer sometimes it's in us, and we just can't think the way we think we can. Like, you have days of clarity, of moments of clarity. Why doesn't it stay? In my experience, we see that every day. We pull that out of people every day, and we have the deep privilege of seeing people become a new version of themselves like, just in a short period of time. So that's how we took what happened to my son, this this atrocity in a way that happened to my son and millions of other children with that condition and similar conditions. And really, we're all affected on this spectrum in one way or the other. Some of it's physical, some of it's mental, some of it's emotional, some of it's spiritual. But my defiance is that I love humans and we do not deserve to be less than our full selves. And I spend my days finding how to get people to their best selves. And I have a deep privilege of doing it and accomplishing it and experiencing and seeing that every day.
Absolutely. I really, really find so many parts of your monologue, Stan, interesting because, first of all, a very, very, you know, a plain, non categorizing thought, which I observe or I feel is very, very relevant is whenever we talk about, you know, defying the systems or not bowing down to whatever is kind of thrown or forced upon us, or what we see is not true, or what we see is the only truth available to us.
Mm.
I think somewhere down the line, why people ask that, okay, if you are saying it is true, why not everyone is using it, or why not everyone is believing it? Because I think at some point, um, we tend to romanticize this. And then there will be systems or people who would call this, oh, this is just alternate medicine or alternate, it's kind of just to balance out in there. There is no truth in that. And, it kind of, once again, the blame games will keep on happening. You gave the example of like how you have to name it, then blame it, and then tame it. So I think it's a classic kind of tactic to kind of, put the reality into a fog in there and not give the deserved mirror to people out there who would feel that there are no options available right now. I have to accept whatever is happening, maybe with our bodies, our minds, or with my soul. A quick pause for you listening listeners. If this conversation is already giving you language for what you feel inside, or if you feel it's helping you see your patterns with a little less shame, hit follow. All right, back to it.
Oh my god. You know, uh, first off, I love your mind and how you articulate it. Um, the question about why wouldn't everyone do this? It's there's a few reasons because everyone doesn't have, in my view, the most people don't have the ability. Number one, you need the desire. You need to recognize there's an issue. This is
Mhm.
like 12 steps. You need to come to an understanding that you're asleep.
Yes.
And that's the hardest thing, and usually people figure that out when they hit a bottom. In other words, we see people that have traveled the world and spent millions of dollars and got nothing or close to nothing. And so that person has hit bottom. They realize they have a problem and it's out of their control. So most people don't realize there's a problem and they don't realize things are out of control. And if you don't have that, the motive to want to research things or think about things differently really comes from that space because we only have the processing power and the technology of our body to experience 0.3% of reality, according to what some people in science are able to determine. Let's call it an approximate, really small amount. And so that means 99.7% we can't perceive and process because we're not built for it. Evolution didn't make us that. We're made simple in terms of the universe. We think we're the highest form of possible intelligence ever, but we're really only perceiving 0.3% of our environment. So we're just like an ant can only perceive certain things. We are an ant in the view of the universe, which means in order for us to move and live and have a happy life, we have to be asleep. That's just a fact. We need to be 99% asleep. Now, it's easier to be asleep than be awake because in order to process, like what I had to do in those 15 months, I didn't do anything else. I didn't work. Sometimes I didn't shower. Like I was in pajamas all the time. Like I was so focused to use my little 0.3% and hyper focus that into an area. And what I found was shocking. Now, if we did that, we'd all be in our pajamas and nobody would be, if we did that for every topic, we couldn't get through every topic in our lifetime. So we pick and choose what we focus on based on our needs. That's just how humans work, and they have to.
Okay.
So in order to do that, you need an extraordinary pain, an extraordinary passion, extraordinary defiance, depending on how you want to look at it. And an average person doesn't have that. They're very interested in like, I play with this for fun and it's not for fun. It's really an experiment, but somebody will say, "Hey, what do you do?" I'll rattle off something that if they got it would shift their life. And I'll say something like, "Well, we had somebody as an example last week that had leukemia cells all over his body. He came in diagnosed with leukemia. He went through some chemo, some radiation. He did like 3 weeks of his 2-year protocol, and his blood looked terrible. We pulled it out in 3 days, and he went back a week later, got blood work, and the blood work said his blood's normal. So we have a confirmation from the traditional that says he had it. We did our thing, and then we have a confirmation that came from the traditional saying he recovered. Now, if anyone really understood that, if anyone listening really could perceive that, they would be writing down all the contact information. People would be flying in and they'd want to sit, next to my car to say, I've got a relative that's got this. And if you have something and you've got evidence that it works and you're able to do it, I've never heard that before. I would do anything to help my family member. That's what would happen. But because we have a disbelief in wanting to dive into rabbit holes, and sometimes we dove into rabbit holes and they turned out it's empty. So people give up on rabbit holes after 2 rabbit holes. Let's say, because they don't. For me, my mind is tuned a little better to discern. So if you say to me, "Hey, you should try this CoQ10. It's amazing." I'm gonna qualify you in whether or not I should dive down your rabbit hole. You're offering me a rabbit hole, and whether it's to research it or to put it in my body. And so I'll say, "Oh, okay. So what were you?" Listen to these questions. This is how to discern. What were you? Why did you buy it? What were you looking to solve? Most people stop there because they're not even sure. because they saw something, somebody was excited, they decided to do it, they wanted to be like somebody else, or they're chasing after something, they're not sure what they're chasing after, and they're blindingly taking it, and they're excited about it, and they say, oh, or maybe they had some result. So I'm trying to qualify why did you do it? What were you targeting? And was there an improvement? Did you get the outcome you were looking for? And most people don't have a good answer to that, which means it's not something for me to consider. As much as I love you, as passionate as you are about it, as much as I trust you, in this particular case, you're not giving me evidence that I'm interested in. And, this would happen a lot when my son was sick. And somebody say, oh, you should try whatever it is. And I'd say, oh, okay. By the way, how's your child doing? And they'd say, oh, I remember there was one that goes, oh, not good. I'm having, and I'm like, everything that you tell me now is based on that answer, which is you don't have an outcome that I'm looking for. Why would I follow your trail? So if you are able to, and for example, I've got a nephew who I try to talk to about some of this stuff, and he'll say, "Oh, it's just not right. It's just not possible." If that was the case, everyone would do it. And if you're trying to say that this thing actually isn't for good, then that's just misinformation. So he's programmed to not think. And so the way I do it is if you tell me something, I put it on the block of examination, and I have questions to determine whether or not it's true or not because I can discern, I can think, I have built that skill. We don't have that. And in the face of someone saying, when they're saying, why isn't everybody doing it? They're basically saying, why hasn't the world done the homework and announced it to me while I'm asleep? And instead, the activity that you need to have in order to have an extraordinary result is you need to do the extraordinary. And the first thing you need to do to find the extraordinary result is you need to qualify everything that comes to you, every piece of information. Consider it as a possibility and ask questions to determine whether or not I'm waiting for someone when I'm randomly out there, I'm waiting for somebody to say, "Can you tell me more about what you just said?" How many people, here's how I would do it. Can you tell me how many people you had come in with that condition and how many of them had an excellent result where it's provable, where you could show video or where you could show lab tests that showed they had it and they didn't? That's an excellent question. And if I say, for example, well, I have hundreds, then they'd say, okay, well, is there a way I can review them to see that this is truthful? And I would say, well, you can go to my YouTube channel. You could come in and watch and just observe what we do day in and day out. I will give somebody the opportunity to see truth. And if someone knew how to define truth and they would say, okay, let me take the time, let me change my schedule to come and see that because I think there's potential value. I don't know if it's true or not, but I'm interested in seeing truth. And they came and they looked, they watched the YouTube channel. Maybe they'll say, can you give me 5 phone numbers of people that had this condition so I can call them? Yes, sure. Here's 5 phone numbers. Call them. And you taught, what happened when you were there? Did you really have it? Stan said this. Is it true? So if you play detective and you are open to figuring out truth on your own and not delegating it to the world, you can find a truth that no one else is awake to. And that's how it works. It doesn't, in fact, if the world is telling you something, that's called, in some cases, marketing. That's what television ads are for. Now, we're so programmed to receive something through the news or the television. What we don't realize is that those businesses are owned or at least well financed by businesses that are interested in not recovering you, that are interested in potentially just soothing your issue. So if you want to know why everybody doesn't know, it's because how everybody gets information is not being fed from people that are actually interested in the human, and they might argue that they're not, that they are, but in my experience, based on results, not the case. And for somebody like me, for me to do podcasting, look, I've been doing this for 22 years. This is the first year I'm starting to speak publicly. I have always been in front of the person in front of me and caring about that only. And after a while, especially in the environment of the world, what happened during COVID is so many people were injured. So many people are suffering. So many people are infertile. So many people have cancers. And whether you want to be awake to that or not, that's the evidence. That's actually the admitted truth out there if you pay attention. So my thing is, my brothers and sisters have been beaten up on the schoolyard, and they have no place to go other than to the next person who is the potential bully to beat them up again. So that's why I'm like, it's time for me to go out in the world and potentially help people think, help people navigate, guide people to their best selves. And so the reason is there isn't enough yet of that momentum to reach this person who's asleep. And unfortunately, when you are asleep, you are often difficult to wake up because you're not looking for reality. You're looking to sleep, but you don't know it. And it's hard to explain that to somebody. And maybe that's the disturbing concept, but it is a lot like the movie The Matrix, where it's like, do you want to take this pill or that pill? Because that pill, you could just wake up in the morning and you move on with your life. This pill, you're going to see the truth. And there is a big response. There's some effort. It's almost like someone saying to you, look, you're out of shape and it's going to require 2 years of working out for you to have the best self. And some people are like, yeah, I like donuts, and that's their life, and that's okay. And they'll complain about, oh, my belly, but are you willing to wake up to see truth and discern it? And I'm waiting for people to reach out and say, can you tell me more about this statement? Rather than saying, "Oh, well, if it's true, it'd be everywhere." Well, that's not true. That's actually not a true statement. You just don't realize that that's what's called the lazy man's way of procrastination. If you wanna know truth and you hear truth or you think somebody might be telling truth, I would invite you to walk over to that person, grab them on the shoulder, turn them around and say, "Can you tell me more about what you just said? And can you tell me how you can, show me evidence that it's true?" Because if what you're saying is true, I'm willing to change my life for myself, for my family. If you're telling me the outcome is they can be a better human in how they function and how relaxed they are in their survivability to terrible conditions, if you have that, show me the details and I will embrace this like crazy, of course, because I love my family. Instead, they go, yeah, well, if that was true, everybody would do it. So that's what I see out there is a lack of desire to pull in information, put it on your examination table, cut it up into pieces, see if it's true, and if it is, act on it. If it isn't, throw it out. People don't even do that. And in the face of someone not willing to take new information in and examine it themselves, which I've experienced, and even people I love that are like, sorry, they're basically saying to me, I am not interested in any new information. I just like to sort of believe that everything's okay because that's easy. And I'm going to complain about it. And I'll be mad at some people and I'll be mad at myself and I'll check out and go to the bars or whatever from time to time. And that will be my life. But the fourth option, rather than attack, hate myself, or check out, the fourth option is get to a table and puzzle, I call it puzzling. In other words, get your data, get all your little pieces, put it out, validate, and if it's true, put your best self together. And if you become a puzzle master, everything that ever happens to you in life, you realize there's a logical solution to everything. And grieving is optional. Sadness is optional. Fear is optional. Anger is optional. The things that's required for production, for learning something new, for living your best life is an action. And how do you take action? You take the best logical information you can, you validate it, and you make a decision and move forward in your life. This is something that has been lost through marketing, through motives that are not in your best interest. And anyone that isn't you, by the way, anyone that isn't you is not going to have the same love and care for you on the planet. Now, it might look that way, but push comes to shove, you're responsible. And there's no one that's going to care more about my son's outcome than myself or his mother. That's it. And if we're not the ones in charge of making the best decisions, and we can have assistants called doctors, we can have assistants called researchers, we can have assistants called whatever I am, for example, researchers that are looking for, but ultimately I'm responsible for my son. You're responsible for your child. I'm responsible for myself. You're responsible for yourself. And if that's the most important thing, wouldn't we be developing the discernment tools and the decision making and trial and error and building the art of becoming our best selves and having the purest blood?
That's such an important question. I think the listeners, I would invite, all of you to take it away with you and at least, do a self introspection, think about it. Um, and thank you so much, Stan, once again, because at least, it's the first step to towards the awareness and the acceptance part, because that itself, it needs a lot of, I believe, courage, at the same time, vulnerability
Yeah.
and clarity as well. So thank you.
I completely agree. You're spot on. And again, I like how your mind works. I like how you're thinking. I like how you explore. It's a these are valuable traits in somebody that is in the spot of doing an interview of somebody, and it allows the person, whoever you're interviewing, the space. It's like you're working together to have discussion. It's not just question and answer. So and that honestly, that type of thinking deepens in exploration. And that's ultimately the result of, to me, a podcast should be. Is there a deeper explanation? Is there an exploration happening for somebody listening? Does it vibe with truth? And does it help them to think and not just entertain or something like that? So I appreciate you. I appreciate the work that you're doing. And I don't know if this is the second or third time we've done something together. I don't actually remember, but I can tell you that each time we sort of get together and chat, I find we go deeper. And this one was really beautiful. So I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. And of course, once again, as a ritual, I have to ask you if listeners they would like to further explore, connect with you. I'm very sure they'll have their own thoughts and opinions. I think that's exactly the beauty of us humans. Not the supreme intelligence, but at least the ability to discuss, even if the opinions are different, but at least discuss for the greater good of the humanity. If they would like to reach out to you, what would be the easiest way?
I love how you qualify that. It's so true. It's like the concept of free speech and free belief, and thank God that we can do that regardless of any restrictions in the world. So yeah, absolutely, and that's how we learn in a way. I love questions, and I love people sparring a little bit as long as they're open to the response. Some people do it as a way to defend and get away from that. That's sort of tiring, but anyone that's really interested and asks a question like, how was that possible? Or how can this really be? Or how can this lead to that? Or how can I get to the something I want? It's it's beautiful because you're working with a mind that's looking to make connections and expand. And that's really, to me, my purpose is I'm trying to raise the level of everyone that I'm in contact with. And we've got 7 billion brothers and sisters approximately that aren't perfectly well in who they are. And great, that is definitely an important thing. But anyway, if people can watch those videos I was talking about, we've got maybe 230 that we published so far. We have thousands that we film. I try to film all the time, like, not as things happen because, I want people to know that they're safe and vulnerable. But in the end, it's like, imagine you come out of, a tornado and then, somebody puts a mic in front of you and says, tell us what happened. It's kind of like that. So those videos are at stansrecoveries.com. You just go to that URL and it will drop you into the YouTube channel, stansrecoveries.com. And if you want to find out more, and also a lot of times based on the day's wisdom or day's experiences, I have a little talk about what we learned today because I learn every day. And those talks are on Spotify. You can, and I've got other resources like that, so people can stay in this vibe of discussion and learning. And it's at stanslinks.com. That also tells you about how to contact us. And we don't have a website. In the world today, for the work that we're doing, there's a lot of force against this type of movement of people thinking and doing what's best for themselves, believe it or not. I mean, there's a huge history of people that just aren't around even because they were explorers like this. And so I don't have a website. I'm not looking to do the marketing campaign either. I don't really believe in that. I just share and invite and let people decide for themselves. So you can go to stanslinks.com and see the resources that we do have available online. And that's all. That's it. That's how you find us, is Stan's Recoveries for videos, Stan's links to read more about it or contact us. And again, thank you so much for today. I had a really, really good time talking to you this morning.
Same here. So this was such a productive and very enriching deep dive exploration
Mm-hmm.
to this, Stan. And listeners, I'll make sure I'll have all the links in the show notes attached along with this episode. So do go and check out. And I think, needless to say, this conversation, it's not a simple checklist, listeners. It's intentional. It's aware. It's less about becoming something new and more about remembering what clarity exactly feels like when interference is reduced. So if you are listening, you are skeptical, it's okay. It's fine. Curiosity doesn't require agreement. But if you're listening and feeling seen, know that change does not begin with perfection. It begins with paying attention. So thank you everyone for joining on the Mindful Living podcast. And Stan, thank you once again for bringing this up.
It's my privilege. Thank you so much. Great spending time with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And listeners, until next time, stay present, stay honest, and stay gentle with yourself. This is your host, Sana, and I'll catch you in the next episode. Thank you.